Hello everyone and welcome back to the Goldmoney Asian Rapid tournament. The preliminaries are over and we are now in the knockout phase of the tournament, and the first match that we're covering is Magnus Carlsen versus Wesley So, and it's a pretty great one. This is the first game and it already started with a bang, and we'd be very happy if this was the finals of the event, but this is only the quarterfinals, so you know, we are in for a treat. So without further ado, let's check it out, and then we're gonna talk a little bit more about the tournament as we usually do. So Magnus with the white pieces opens with c4. He goes for the English opening. We have e5 by Wesley, knight to c3, knight to f6, and now knight to f3. We're gonna have the four knights of the English. We have a3 by Magnus, and now d5, striking in the center. We have captures, and now queen to c2. So already developing the queen. We have f5 by Wesley, and now d3. And here there is one game in the database where knight to f6 was played, but here we have bishop to e7, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Magnus continues here. We have e3, bishop to e6, nicely continuing development, and bishop to e2. Magnus does the same. We have castles, both players bring their king to safety, and now a5, preventing further expansion on the queen side from white by playing something like b4. So rook to d1, and now king to h8, a nice prophylactic move with the king. Later on you don't have to worry about any checks incoming your way, and if needed you can always tuck this bishop back to g8. We have knight to a4 by Magnus, now fighting for the c5 square, and Wesley doesn't want to allow knight to c5, so here he just brings the queen to d6, now grabbing hold of the c5 square, and now as a5 has been played, you don't have to worry about b4 and white really grabbing that c5 square. So bishop to d2, and now comes g5. So Wesley starts his attack on the king side. Now the king has been put to h8, now you can bring the rook even to g8, the other rook to f8, or, you know, depending on how white plays. And here, the principal thing to do when you're attacked on the king side, you want to counterattack on the, mostly in the center of the board. So here Magnus strikes in the center with d4. We have e4 by Wesley, and now knight to, that's not a knight to e5. And this knight to e5 is a pawn sacrifice, and Magnus does it in order to open up this diagonal. But Wesley still has his dark square bishop, so it's questionable how well Magnus will be able to use this dark square diagonal. So here knight captures, pawn captures, queen captures, Wesley accepts the pawn, and now bishop to c4, already with a terrible threat of bishop captures on d5, just removing that defender of the c3 square, and if you allow this, then just captures the bishop, grabs hold of this diagonal, could be very, very unpleasant for black. So here we have bishop to f6, now countering this idea, and now knight to c5. Now again, putting pressure on this bishop, so you can't grab the b2 pawn, as the bishop on e6 would be hanging. So bishop to g8, luckily Wesley already played king to h8, and now rook 8 to b1. Stopping this queen captures on b2 idea. We have queen back to e7 by Wesley, and now knight captures on b7. Magnus grabs his pawn back. We have f4 by Wesley. Wesley continues the attack on the king side, and now Magnus needs to find a good continuation. b4 is a very nice continuation here, as you might have imagined, but Magnus just ruthlessly grabs another pawn. He creates a passed a pawn, and now his position seems to be great unless Wesley finds one move. So feel free to pause the video here, but not just yet. First, Wesley played f captures, and now feel free to pause the video here, so it's a little bit easier, and find Wesley's idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the only move that gives Wesley a winning edge. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course rook captures on a5. That's why capturing the a pawn wasn't the most precise way to continue. Now the point is, if Magnus accepts this and plays bishop captures on a5, then we play knight captures on e3 with an attack on the rook, queen, and the bishop here. And after the queen moves, we're gonna pick up the rook here, captures, and now queen to c5 check. You lose the bishop as well. So there's that. King h1, we're going to capture here, and after captures and captures, at the end of this long variation, we are up a full piece, and we have a completely winning game. So instead, after this rook captures on a5, Magnus decided to go bishop captures on d5 first, and now Wesley plays rook captures on d5. Now, rook captures on d5 is a fine move, but there is a much finer one, and I'm just going to show it to you because it's, well, it's just... it would be unfair to ask you to find this, but instead of capturing here, the in-between rook to c5 is the move that Wesley should have played now, with an attack on the queen, and now the queen has to move. So once the queen moves, let's say you play now a queen captures on e4, now we capture here on d5 with the bishop, and now you don't really have all that many squares. You can trade queens, then captures, and now Wesley can simply enjoy his winning advantage. He's still up a piece, and it's not much of a problem winning this. However, he played rook captures on d5 right away, and now he keeps the queens on the board, and this allows Magnus to stir some trouble. Here, bishop to b4, attacking the rook and the queen. And Wesley now trades on d1, although you could play c5. c5, even though, yes, you can just capture on d5 and remove one of the defenders, is still the best way to go. Because after we capture and bishop captures, you're going to capture here, but then queen c7 pins the bishop, so you don't lose the rook on f8. So that was kind of the way to go. b4 still gives white counterplay, but it's a better position for black, of course. So instead, after this bishop to b4, Wesley played rook captures on d1 with check, rook captures, and now c5. But now this makes it a bit easier for Magnus. Bishop captures on c5. We have queen to c7 blocking, and now b4. But now, with a pair of rooks traded off the board, it seems to be more favoring Magnus than it actually does Wesley. So here we have rook to e8, guarding the e4 pawn. Now comes a4. Magnus says, all right, I don't really have much to offer here. I'm down a piece. I have to push my passed pawn and hope for the best. So here, bishop to e5. Wesley threatens the h2 pawn, h3, and now g4, saying, okay, you either capture or I'm going to bust open your king's defenses. So we have h captures on g4, and now queen to g7, preparing to capture back. So Magnus plays bishop to d4, saying, okay, if you capture, then I can capture this with check. And now we have bishop to e6. So what do you play here? You could also play queen capture. You could also play bishop captures on d4 right away, but then after rook captures on d4 and let's say queen captures on g4, we continue pushing b5, and it's still a piece up for black, but it's a light square bishop, and this pawn is on a light square, so it kind of blocks this diagonal that you really want to use for attacking purposes. So here, the two passed pawns would be more favorable than this, awkwardly placed bishop on g8. So instead, after bishop to d4, we have bishop to e6. Wesley wants to activate this bishop somehow. Magnus plays queen to c6, now with pressure on the bishop and on the rook here. And now Wesley defends not by playing rook to e7, which is the correct idea. He defends by playing bishop to d7, but now it's Magnus who's completely winning. So feel free to pause the video here and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on always finding new ways to sacrifice your queen. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course queen captures on d7. After Magnus played this, it was in this position on move 33 that Wesley resigned the game, as now there is nothing more to be done here. Point is, if you accept the queen, then it's just the bishop captures on e5 with check, and we win the queen back with a far superior position. Rook captures to eliminate check. Now rook captures on d7, and it's 5 pawns against 2 and 2 connected pass pawns here on the queen side. This is completely unplayable. And aside from that, after queen captures on d7, you really don't have a good move, because the rook is hanging there. There's just not much you can do. You can't defend the rook and keep an eye on the bishop here. So if you move the queen to defend the rook, then you lose the bishop here, and there's really not all that much. If you play something like rook to e7, then queen to d8, and you're again getting checkmated. Queen to g8. Now we're gonna capture with the bishop here with check. The queen can't move, the king can't move. You can either block with the rook or capture the bishop, but it doesn't matter. Rook captures on e5, just queen to f6 with check, queen to g7, and now rook to d8 with check. And once the rook blocks, we're just gonna capture here with checkmate. So Wesley really giving Magnus the win here. He had the upper hand. He took advantage of Carlsen's mistake. He played the correct rook captures on a5 idea, but he just didn't continue in the best possible way, and that's of course not the way to defeat the world champion. So here, like I said, Magnus just played queen captures on d7, and Wesley resigned the game. So really a nice game. Magnus starts off with a win, and we'll see what happens in this one, as Wesley has proven to be a most unpleasant opponent opponent for Magnus, so we'll see if he will be able to bounce back and pose more problems, because 4 games are being played in the match today, so there's plenty of chance for Wesley to bounce back. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Andrei Sandu, David Kimura, Nigel Holloway, Happy Birthday Gavin, and Leander Moderson for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the knockout section of this tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.